Welcome back to another episode of Trucker Talk Radio, Behind the Wheelhouse. I'm Justin, and I appreciate y'all coming on another episode journey with us today. My guest today is someone who has spent more than a decade focused on one of the trucking industry's biggest challenges: finding, hiring, retaining, and protecting quality drivers. Now, anybody that's never been a recruiter, that is a career, not a job, I can promise you. Scott Rea is the president of Avatar, a company that has become one of the transportation industry leading providers of driving recruiting, compliance, safety, onboarding, and driver management solutions. Avatar's mission is simple but powerful: help carriers fill empty seats, bring drivers home safely, and protect transportation companies throughout stronger compliance, recruiting, and risk management practices. What caught my attention about Scott's leadership is Avatar isn't just focused on hiring drivers. They are focused on the entire driver life cycle: recruiting, onboarding, compliance, safety, and retention. Over the years, Scott has become a respected voice in transportation leadership, driver recruiting, compliance technology, and the ongoing challenge of attracting and retaining professional drivers in a consistent changing marketplace. Today, we're going to discuss the state of driver recruiting and retention, compliance, safety, technology, and of course, the ugly word fraud. Scott, welcome Behind the Wheelhouse.
Hey, appreciate it, Justin. That was an introduction my mother would be proud of. Thank you.
Well, no problem, and you deserve it. I've as we talked before we got on air, I've recruited for 6 or 7 years. It is a tough job. It's not the job that you maybe talk yourself into in the beginning, think it's going to be, all roses, but it's very well fulfilling when things go good. But there's just a lot of obstacles. So I'm glad that you have you on and very interested to hear your story. So let's start with that story. Let's get to the beginning. How did you grow up and how did you get into transportation before we even get into recruiting? What brought you over to the dark side?
The dark side. Well, as a guy once said, I'm just a kid from Cleveland. The guy, he said he was a kid from Akron.
Yeah.
How did I get in this business? Probably like a lot of people was I needed a job. And here I am 14 years later, still having fun. So what happened was a now business partner found me as a kid who was looking for something to do. I was doing research projects at a university. Still got my cup, my mug to show proud for BW. And he's an OG. He grew up in the industry. He identifies as an old crusty trucker. And he worked in recruiting and safety and HR and compliance over the years, and even at insurance companies. So we had a full spectrum, much like you. And so he taught me the business. And it just so happened that as I got to know him, he had a good friend who ran J-Rail Transportation out of Akron, Ohio, and they wanted to grow really fast. And as it just so happened that at that time, they were looking for a couple of recruiters. They lost both of theirs. They had the customers, they had the trucks, they had the financing. And my business partner, Mark, said, "Hey, give us a shot. Let us take over the recruiting department." So at 26, I got a chance with a pretty solid budget. I got a chance to go learn, explore, spend a bunch of money, waste a decent amount of money, and learn.
Oh, yeah.
Hire some recruiters, recruit some drivers myself. So that's really how I got into business and learned the industry. And along the way, Mark showed me the ins and outs, and he gave me a good perspective of the different angles. Recruiting HR have got one lens, safety and compliance have another. And then from his industry insurance perspective, you got the risk side, and what does that entail? And so you put all those things together and you talk with the insurance companies, they know that the risk starts with the person you put behind the wheel.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of how we focused. It was, how do we build a recruiting machine that can hire, at that time was 20 drivers a month was our goal. How can we do that? We spend the least amount of money to do so, right? The lowest cost per hire. And we were graded on keeping them, the retention component. So, we got paid more if they stayed. Yeah. And so in a good way, we had a healthy perspective that was aligned with the value of the business. And so it was a good balance of a super aggressive growth with finding the right people, not just finding warm bodies to put in cold seats.
Hey drivers, our partners over at Zero Breeze have designed a no idle air conditioner for sleeper cabs and fleets that can pay for itself in just one summer. If you're spending up to $40 a night in fuel, it's time to stop idling and start saving. For $50 off, email sales@zerobreeze.com or text them at 945-247-1298. And don't forget to ask them about their extended warranty option. Check them out today at zerobreeze.com. What I've learned over my years in recruiting, that is what 90% of the trucking industry does. They just, and that's why the drivers bounce so much, is they're not a good fit. They're just, like you said, a seat and a cold seat just to warm it up. And that's all they do is they warm it up a little bit and then they're right out of there. And retention is, I didn't realize it honestly until I got into recruiting. I'd been in trucking through LTL and even brokering before I got into the recruiting side. I had no idea how bad the retention side of the industry was. I mean, it's a wonder that these trucking companies are in business, because not only do they lose a lot of money there, but some of these companies are spending tens of $1,000s a month in recruiting budgets.
Oh, yeah.
And then you add in that they don't keep them. I mean, it's a wonder how, these do it. So tell us the story of Avatar. How did you kind of want to know what you do, but first, what led you to have your own, to get your own thing started?
Well, again, I'll give credit to Mark. He was a serial entrepreneur, so he had his hands in many pots, and you can only run so many things at once. And so at the time, I was 26, so that's young enough not to have a wife, a mortgage, anything, a dog.
Right.
So it's a good time to go for something. And so I did. And the opportunity we had was we had some software, kind of lying on the side. And we had a large customer who had a really big problem. They wanted to grow. And so putting those two things together, I didn't go to school to be an engineer, software engineer. I certainly didn't go to school for transportation or recruiting. But it was a degree in entrepreneurship. So it was just, how do you go out there and what is the customer problem and how can you go solve it better than anyone else can? And so how we started the business was we were lucky to have a customer with a giant recruiting problem, and then a customer who had 3,500 school buses across the Midwest, which had different rules and regulations for each local district. So what that means together, we could build something on the back end that could handle any complexity that's thrown at us in terms of if you're a tanker, you got hazmat endorsements. Are you in the oil fields and Schlumberger's got a specific requirement for you? Are you in the state of California and you've got something you got to work on over there? So whatever there was out there, we had, and you put those two things together, you got a pretty powerful product. And so I think what's made us successful and continue to grow year after year is we've always had the job of our customer. And I think that's the hardest thing when you're building a software product is you can only learn so much by doing interviews and shadowing the people. But when you do the job yourself, you know it intimately, you know your customer intimately, and you know their pains. Because if you ask a customer, if I say, hey, what's wrong? If you had a magic wand, what could I get out of it? They're limited to what they know is possible and real. But when you do the job, you go, man, why? You do that task 100 times. Why am I still doing this? How can we make this better? So I think it's been the key to success is doing the job.
So what is the one thing that customers, when you get a new customer, what's the one thing they're asking for? Are they trying to find more qualified drivers? Are they trying to find a driver that will stay long? What are they really asking for? Because it seems like to me, every carrier's different. They all have the same problems, but it's like they only focus on one thing instead of like I said in the opening, you're looking at everything, which you pretty much have to, because how you can stand out in this, and this is from my personal experience, when I had my recruiting company, I didn't get paid until the driver got hired. And then I got paid as long as that driver was there. I got a little something, because how I wanted to be seen in the business was I'm just not throwing you people. And you will attest, there's a lot of work to get a cold driver all the way through the system to be hired. It's not just, hey, here's a driver, go, because you're not actually always a part of the full process. You might hand the driver off to that company's onboarding team, then you have no clue what they're really doing. You're trying to push them or stay with the driver and keep them happy. So, that was always my thing. I was like, well, what more can I do? I can only do, to this point, and somebody's got to pull it. And I've got a lot of time, effort, and money in this driver trying to get him to your door. So, again, what are these customers asking? What's the one thing that, if you could say, that they're trying to get?
Yeah, if it's one thing that we hear over and over again, it's one-stop shop. And the reason we named the product DriverHub was to infer that recruiting, compliance, safety would be hooked up into your ecosystem. So when we're doing discovery, asking questions, we want to know, okay, who are you running for background checks, MVRs? Those are kind of obvious ones, but we're getting into who's your TMS, what's your telematics system, we're using for payroll, or using HRIS system, and really mapping out what their ecosystem is, looking for what are points where someone's having to key in information, and how can we sync in rosters. And when you have 6, 7 systems, you got to keep up to date. That's where human error comes in, and that's where issues can happen. So, for example, a TMS, it's not the end of the world to have to type in a driver's contact information, 6 times in the system. It's annoying.
Right.
But what's really important is that when that driver's expiration for the motor vehicle report or the license is in the system where dispatch does their work, because dispatch doesn't want to hang out in an HR system or a recruiting system or a compliance system. So you got to go meet them where they are to truly lock out that driver from going on the road. So why are they looking for a one-stop shop? It's because they want all their systems talking, synced up, and they're trying to reduce human error. And a line we say is we want you to be able to give more love by doing less tasks. And so there's a whole bunch of things we have to do in compliance and onboarding and recruiting to bring on a driver. And that stuff usually isn't productive. If we gave you're a recruiter, if we give you 100 names, there's probably only 10, 15 that are kind of worth talking to, but yet you're combing through all of those.
Yep.
How can we get it so you can only talk to the 15? And how can we automate those tasks to build the DQ file so you're spending your time with the people that are worth your time? And on the compliance side, compliance is usually the enemy of safety. And what I mean by that is they're the rules. You got to follow them. But what they aren't really focused on is risk management. The more time you're walking up and down, getting your steps into the photocopier with a license or a medical card, that's time you're not being spent coaching drivers, looking at telematics, and hanging out with as many safety directors as I have. That usually when someone is distracted, most times it's not on the phone. It's because something's going on in their life. They have something going on. A spouse is sick at home. An aunt that they care about is having a tough time. And that's the distraction that they're going through. And you can kind of see that in their driving habits. You can have a conversation, just, are you okay? Because this isn't how you normally operate. But if you're bogged down in the task, you don't get to give that love to that driver. The worst thing we hear is I have to firing. He's a great driver, but I had to let him go. And when we hear that, I go, man, whatever that was preventable.
Exactly. Now, and he makes some good points. And one point I want to touch on is you're talking about, integrating and trying to get everything into one nucleus system. That's the whole problem with trucking in general. I don't understand. I understand why. I don't understand why they don't want to do it, but none of these trucking companies want to work and integrate all these systems together because they're afraid somebody's going to find out what they're doing or find out maybe their secret they think's better. But that's not what all this integrating stuff is nowadays. I mean, with my sponsor ready app, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying just to be the driver verification platform and have all these companies just integrate and flow through us to make everything simpler. But there's a lot of companies like, we don't integrate. They barely want to integrate with a TMS system. And I'm like, it's a nucleus that you need to have, and it makes your job so much better. So I'm glad you brought that point up, but I want to dig in a little bit more to this DriverHub. So with y'all handling so many parts of in a system, so are you saying y'all take y'all system, the DriverHub, you integrate with all of their TMS, ATS, you know and all that. So are y'all completely handling everything, and they just have maybe one or two employees, and then like you get data to know, it just does a lot more tasks, or is it a lot of data that they can go over to see, okay, these drivers might need a little bit more coaching for this. So like, what's the nucleus of all that?
Sure. I'll start with the core and then,
Mhm.
which systems should do what.
Okay.
So the core, if you put it in three buckets, recruiting, compliance, and safety.
Mhm.
So who's on the recruiting side? Who tends to use our software? It's going to be a recruiter, and their manager or recruiters and the manager, depending on the size of the organization. Sometimes as you know, with the larger customers, that can be a small army.
Yeah.
And other times it's a one-person army who's got recruiting, compliance, and safety, and they're doing it
Mhm.
all. And so on that recruiting side, it's a tool, right? It's the applicant tracking system. It's how do you go post the ad, screen them, find them, run the MVRs, background checks. That's what that integration looks like. When you're ready to bring them on board and you hit the approve button, that's really where the flow happens into the operational ecosystem. So when it comes to compliance, right, that's post hire. And so things we've seen, like a TMS out there, like Tom McLeod, who's on your show recently, he's one of the OGs in the industry. There's a
Absolutely.
bunch of little upstarts coming up, but they all have a feel for compliance in their software. And but what we see is it's a good spot to store the data, but it's not a good spot to collect the data. Why? Because there are some nuances to the tasks. I'll share with you a task that we automated that causes a whole bunch of delight for both recruiters and compliance. Verifying the medical examiner, right? So what does that process look like? So today, either the driver takes a picture or walks it in physically, and you go make a copy of the medical card. You give it back to the driver. You then upload it to your computer. You pull it up and you go to the National Registry site. You type it in, and then if it's a current employee, you got to remember to run the MVR in 15 days because you know that DMV didn't do it right away. And you know the medical examiner didn't do it right away for the DMV. So you got a lag.
Right.
So what did we do? We made a feature where the driver gets an automatic text. The driver takes a picture of it. The system then reads the ME number, goes to the site, crawls it, punches it in for the admin, takes a screenshot, brings it back, and will order the MVR for that person scheduled 15 days later to give the ME and the DMV time
Right.
to do their job. And so those are just little things of like, what happens if that doesn't get done right? Because we see like 9 times out of 10, they're compliant. Well, 99 out of
Mhm.
100, they're compliant. But
Yep.
you order that on day 16, you can't
Mhm.
undo that. You are forever uncompliant until the next year, your time that medical card expires and you run that process again.
Yep.
And so and then now you have to write an apology note and just, hope you don't get audited at that moment. And so that's kind of the thing of like, no one's evil for doing that. It's just an admin task
Mhm.
that has to get done. And then on the safety side, so coaching, we believe coaching should happen in the telematics system, in Samsara, in Motive, etc. Netrodyne, they all have got their scoring systems. They've got the video that you can use to communicate with the driver. The driver can see themselves doing it. That's where
Right.
that should happen. What we've built on incident management is record keeping, and it's to show that you're doing your due diligence, you're having the right conversations, you're logging it there. If there was an incident, that you can log those details. And a key to victory that we've seen, you're down the south. Is Morgan and Morgan in your neck of the woods, Justin?
Yeah, they're based in Memphis, pretty big. Yep.
So, and what Morgan and Morgan and up in Louisville, it's the Hammer. I mean,
Yep.
these are franchises. These
Uh,
are money-making machines. I think I
yep.
saw it was like 26 billion was spent on ads attacking trucking companies last year.
I can
So
believe it.
they're only spending that money if they're getting a return.
Yep.
And so what's the key? You gotta settle whether you're right or wrong. You gotta
Mhm.
settle before they get involved. And so you gotta move quick and you gotta get data into the hands of your insurance company so that their tag team that their team can come in and close it, or you can make a decision yourself. Because what we see are gaps, reporting gaps. Whether it's dispatch maybe get the call at 2 a.m. and there's a post-it note waiting for the safety director on their desk that says we had an accident. And maybe there was something obvious missed, but usually what happens is like the other party doesn't feel the love coming anytime soon. And so they
Mhm.
were fine. But if the lawyer calls them before you call them, so
That's right.
you have the advantage until they call, then it's over. So those are the things, Justin, are the problems that we're trying to solve, and kind of that one-stop shop
Mm.
of if everything isn't working in harmony, if recruiting isn't bringing in the right person in the door, and they can only bring the right person in the door if they've got enough volume to be selective, and
Right.
you and the right screening and filters to only talk to that 15 of 100 that come in the door, and the compliance isn't bogged down in paperwork, they can actually go be safety and risk professionals. And when the accident does happen, that you're quick and timely to resolve it, and you've documented your coaching and your training in one spot, so that if an attorney does come your way, you can export it and give them the file quickly. And one of our customers called it the wall of documentation. He said, the quicker I give the most amount of information, Morgan & Morgan knows that I got my act together, and
Right.
they're going to move on. They want an easy fight. They're lazy. They don't want a hard
Yes.
fight.
Well, and two, when you talk about these lawyers, when you have a case, you speak to a paralegal, and then they decide if it's worth moving it to a lawyer. So, I mean, yeah. So if they know, if you say, "Oh, I'm going to sue XYZ carrier," and then they go do their quick research, go, "Hey, that company has all their ducks in a row." Yeah, we can't help you. So you're 100% right. And even back to your point about like the driver not having his documents right. I worked with the company last year, had 150 trucks. So it was not a small mom and pop operation. They had changed safety managers like during the holidays. So the new one will start the first year. I believe about April rolled around and they found out that everybody from January to April had not been checked on. So any CDLs that wasn't, compliant, the physicals that wasn't compliant, they're riding around illegal, and no one even cared to figure it out because the new safety person thought that somebody else was doing all that and didn't realize that he was the safety everything
He was
director. And
ignorant. Yeah.
yeah, and truly, I don't think that safety director even had a clue because I don't think he was really a safety director in my opinion. And it's a decent sized company. So
For sure.
if you're a 25 truck carrier and it's you and your wife and your daughter running the company, especially things can get missed if the bigger companies can. So yeah, I like your product. I think you're right. A lot of little tedious stuff can be done that makes it where it's not missed because you can miss one time and it can cost you a lot.
A
And
lot.
I think a lot of our listeners that are not in trucking don't understand that. I mean, one mistake can cost you your company realistically if it's the right kind of mistake. I want to touch a little bit back on your recruiting for a minute because that's my background and everything. So kind of walk me through. So you go in, do y'all have a place that you put the ads? Do y'all do all that or do y'all are y'all do y'all send them a list of drivers? So like, how does that part work? And they're like, where does the drivers typically find your company's type ads if they're looking for a job? Where do they need to look for?
Sure. So we have two groups over here. We have
Mhm.
our software group and we have our services group. So the software, and I'll bring it back to a quick, you asked how we got started.
Mhm.
When I was learning recruiting, you kind of learn the 5 P's of marketing. We thought there were really three in recruiting: pitch, placement, and process. And so the software is the process. You got to make it frictionless for a driver to
Yes.
apply. A very similar thing that Ready App is thinking about.
Yeah.
Do not make it hard to apply. Kind of
Exactly.
at that
Absolutely.
early stage of the funnel, all are welcome.
Mhm.
Now, as a recruiter, you do not want to talk to everybody. So now enter in your screening, right? And so that's a part of the process. And how can you
Mhm.
automate those tasks? Whether it's, hey, this person's qualified, let's automatically order an MVR. Hey, this
Yeah.
person is not qualified, let's not order that MVR, right? You can
Mhm.
set up those gates and you should make it go as far along the process as you can, all the way to the interview process without having to touch that person.
Mhm.
That's the software side. On the services side, we talk about a lot here. A lot of how I learned it at JRail. What I
Mhm.
talk a lot about on the speaking circuit is finding your purple cow. That's being unique, and that's a nod to Seth Godin back in the early O's. He
Mhm.
called that in digital marketing. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of black and white cows. A lot of people saying the same thing. That's a black and white cow.
Yep.
Uh, you've done a lot of recruiting your days, Justin. You know that what does a typical ad say? Great pay, great home time, great equipment.
Yep. And what's funny is drivers only read that. They don't never read the body of work. They just read that. And then too, and you probably had this before you had your software a lot. The drivers forget who the heck they're talking to. I don't know how many times I'd be working with the driver and, they had a scheduled drug test on this day. Well, company had called, hey, your driver never showed up yesterday for the drug test. I'd call the driver like, hey, what happened? Oh, I took the drug test yesterday. I said, you didn't take it from my company. Oh, that must have been for the other one because they're always talking to two or three companies. I
Well, they
mean,
are. They're good.
you
They're good
know,
daters. They're always
yes.
dating multiple people at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So 100%, and that's kind of why of not every driver should be worth your time in the beginning.
Mm,
Look, it is what it is, right? Everyone's dating each other quickly and multiple people at the same time. We tested out an AI agent to answer the phone back in 2024, and
mm.
back then, that it was the Stone Ages, right, Justin?
Right.
We were
Yep.
like, "Hey, would a driver actually interact with this like an agent?" And the quick answer was yes, because they were happy to talk after hours and actually get someone.
Yep.
One, you could put more guardrails on that knowledge base that drivers are always wondering, am I getting lied to? Am I getting the hook on? By owning that's an AI agent, and that actually said, okay, well, that is the rules. This is what, there's no ad-libbing by the recruiter, allowed.
True.
And so then that would qualify the candidate, send them the link, they finish out the app, sign it, and then the recruiter logs
Mhm.
in and goes, hey, this is someone that's worth talking to. Or I'm really glad I didn't talk to that person because they're not qualified, they don't live where I want, they don't have the CDL, they deliver pizza, whatever it is. So our philosophy on pitch on the Purple Cow is standing out from the herd. And
Mhm.
so, but we're not trying to screen in an ad. We're trying to attract in an ad.
Mhm.
And something I just wanted to clarify is, a driver will never see Avatar Fleet out there at all,
Mhm.
because we believe it's the company's brand
Mhm.
that needs to be out
Right.
there advertising. So it needs to be ABC Carrier XYZ Trucking,
Mhm.
whose brand is out there. We think that's really important. When we see something I'm morally opposed to are the multi-carrier apps, the company that's doing the recruiting versus
Mhm.
or that software company versus the carrier themselves. That's increases what you and I just talked about, which is the guy didn't even know who he applied for.
Yep.
I'm sure you mentioned I've done the same thing where I've answered the phone. I said, "Hey, thanks for calling JRail. How can I help you?" And he goes, or I would call him and he go, "Who
Yeah.
are you?" Right? And you're like, "Well, you just applied 30 seconds ago." He doesn't know who
Yeah.
you're talking to.
Absolutely.
And that's the problem. So the purple cow is that when they hit your page, it's about you and something remarkable in one sentence that they're going to want to continue and it's going
Mm.
to stick in their brain versus the 50 ads that they saw that day.
No, absolutely. That's the thing. I think people that are not in recruiting, they don't understand that part. I mean, it's so much. I mean, like we said earlier, I mean, I know one mega carrier that spends about $90,000 a month in recruiting. And I mean, that's a lot of money. And yeah, they get plenty of drivers to talk to, but I mean, as we talked about before the show got started, I mean, Indeed used to be a very good tool. Back then, you were getting it for free. Yeah, I did. I had it set up where,
Right.
but I got tons of drivers that were fry cooks and librarians and even nothing to do with trucking. So when it's free, you don't mind,
Right.
wallering through that a little bit. But when you're spending, a couple $100 a day or $1,000 a day, whatever, you want drivers or leads that you can actually interact with. And I like what you were saying about how you do a screening. That's big because yes, a MVR or a PSP report are not that expensive to pull per se. But when you're pulling 20 a day, couple hundred a week, that adds up to a couple salaries, in the department. I know from my early days of even before I was a recruiter and, I was an agent owner, we were back then, this was well before COVID, like mid 2012 or something, maybe even. We were bringing in at this company, we were bringing in 30 to 40 drivers a day. And I
Wow.
know for a fact the company was running MVRs and PSPs in every single one of them. But we
Hmm.
didn't we didn't bring in 30, we didn't clear 30 drivers a day. That might get to 10. And, and of course, I didn't know even then because I wasn't keeping up with it. But, I thought about it after I got in recruiting and started seeing budgets and what it cost. I'm like, man, that was a lot of money just thrown out the window. And because nobody back then had the technology or the want to do the reviews, they just seen a name and called it and started the process. And until they actually got them on the phone and two, a lot of times, no offense, drivers, but y'all don't tell the truth all the time. One of the biggest issues I always ran into was the SAP program.
Yep.
Have you failed a drug test? Nope, no, sir, never have. You ever been in a SAP program? What is that? All right, good, you're good. 2 days later, get a call from the company. Can't hire him. He was part of the SAP program. I'm like, well, I just physically asked that, so you got to do your due diligence for that. And I like your point on the AI. I never thought about that before. I can't remember, was it Hey Bubba or somebody last year I did a interaction with at the Mid America Truck Show, and I did it, but they were doing it for the broker side, and I was acting like I was a driver and went through the whole process, negotiated a rate. But I've never thought about the way you did, because you're right, and we talk about it all the time about the embellishments that recruiters do to get them on the hook. I've never thought about that. That's a unique way to thinking about it. That the AI can't really lie to you. I mean, you could program it to say something, I guess,
Sure. I
per
mean, it's
se,
the quality of
but
the person behind it for sure.
right. But if you keep asking questions, the AI is pretty much going to revert to what it's supposed to. So a driver should feel more confident. I don't know if they really want to talk to an AI agent. I don't know if I can, because they can't never understand my southern accent. But I could see that, because they're not going to lie to you. They're going to tell you what's programmed. Where if you know that an AI is not telling you the truth, you could easily go, okay, it's programmed. Them numbers are not accurate. But when it's a human, your instincts to trust that human, that they're telling you you can make an extra 1,000 than the person down the street. So I like your concept on that.
Hey, you said when you talked about Indeed, it sparked something I just want to say. A lot of people ask me, what's the best place to advertise for people? You hinted at it before. And my answer is always, where's your lowest cost per hire?
Yep.
And that could be, and look at it by job and location. And a quick story is that at JRail, we were based out of Akron, but we were
Mhm.
hiring in Akron, Cleveland. We opened up a terminal in New York. We opened up a terminal in Indianapolis. We had some stuff going in Houston and Dallas. And those might have been different planets. And then we went down to Columbus, which is just 2 hours away, an hour and a half away from Akron. And it was a completely different world, right? We were unknown down
Sure.
there. And
Right.
so it was way more competitive for drivers. And so that's why you got to look at it by job and location, not fall in love with the favorite, and just be ruthless about who's going to give you the lowest cost per hire. And some people, it could be Indeed in a certain spot. And I hear you, Indeed is changing the game. They are all about driving up. The
Yeah.
free is dead. So that
Yeah.
absolutely has changed, and they want to keep the driver on Indeed. They don't want to send them to the company site, because the more on Indeed, the more they can get you. No different than Zuckerberg on Facebook. The longer they can keep them scrolling, the more money they're going to make.
That's right.
So yeah, they're not at your goal. I heard this once, and maybe this is helpful for everyone. Is there's rented land and there's land you own. The land you own is your website, your careers page. Your job as a marketer is to get them the heck off of Indeed, Facebook,
Mhm.
whatever site they're on, and get them to your site where you control the message, and they're not going to get ads from other carriers.
Yep.
And that's part of the beef that we're hearing out there with the other 800-pound gorilla in our space, is that people are getting advertisements as they apply, as they go through onboarding, and as they go through safety training after they've been on board.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, I hear that complaint about them all the time. And even another thing, because I know exactly who you're talking about, they have all the driver documents that you want, but they don't give them to you unless you pay for them. And it's the driver's documents. The drivers should own that. And that's something that we do at Ready App, is the drivers own all the documents that we don't. But it's funny you say that, because these marketplaces like Indeed, Jobs and Trucks, all these, do they really want the driver to get hired?
No.
They ain't no money if they do, right? And so they want them reoccurring. Those companies thrive, and a lot of recruiters do. They thrive on retention. And I understand it. It makes your job a lot easier, because you could just place them. But back to your point about the advertisement, I don't know, I'm not a tech person, so I don't know the technology, but they should have walls put up. If they're talking to ABC carrier, XYZ should not be able to enter the fray. Now, if they want to go into their job store and search for other jobs in their areas after they applied, that's part of you being in a third party area that you can't control. But they should not, because why wouldn't you want? I mean, yeah, the more they can throw out, the more times they'll fill out the application, more times the pages flip, more traffic they get, the more money they get from, all these different platforms, a way of making revenue. So I like that. I do think the more technology that big gorilla in the room is going to get more and more competition, which is good for everybody. Competition is good for everybody. I mean, it just is. It might not be if you're the big player, but for everybody else, it's great, and it's great for the drivers. The drivers need, as you said, and as we do at Ready App, something simple. Process is easy, it's understandable, and then on the backside, everything flows fast. So then the driver stays engaged, because you can lose a driver engagement pretty quickly because of the competition. And I'll give you an example. I've been like every recruiter. I've been to jobs and trucks and bought their list for the month or whatever. And I'll never forget it. I called a guy at 9 o'clock in the morning Central Time, and he didn't realize that he put his name out there. I guess he clicked the button and he was up there for sale, basically, whatever. He said, "What in the hell is going on? You're my 50th call this morning." I looked at my watch again. I was like, "Shit, man, that's only been maybe 2 hours." He said, "I'm getting burned up. Do you know why?" And I explained, how I found him and this. And he's like, "I'm not even looking for a job." And I'm thinking, that right there woke me up. And I'm like, okay, everybody's calling him. He's not even a good candidate, because no matter what you've got for sale, it's not good enough, because somebody's going to call that you might get in 3/4 of the way, and then you can't move forward. So something I want to talk about, and you've already kind of brought it up, and I truly think I'm a very hard believer of this. Ready App's very much a part of this. With everything that's went on with the Supreme Court ruling, now these brokers have got to do a lot more vetting. I think it's easy to say that carriers didn't do a good job vetting their drivers. And I think it goes back to filling seats. I think these recruiters just want to fill the seats because everybody's handling that truck sitting that's costing us X amount of dollars a day. And then, as you said earlier, human error. It's not hard to make a mistake and forget about something. That's why, some of these TMS systems and your system has those parameters in there that remind you CDL's 30 days away from going expired. At the 15th day, you're cut off until you get a new one. Those things are huge, and they're not major things you add in, maybe cost wise or tech wise, but it's so important. So you take the human element out of it. And I think everybody has to vet these drivers better, but I think it's on the drivers to vet themselves and stand out. I think the drivers need to have, like with y'all's with the digital stuff, or with Ready At with the digital passport that has every document they need for trucking. And we've got a scoring card and stuff that's coming in there to where the drivers can go here, digitally go here. This is who I am. This is how I am. I'm setting myself up better. And I think that in turn will take some of the pressure off the brokers. I know the brokers are worried about vicarious liability and things of that nature. They don't need their work history. They don't need a lot of those. They don't even need the medical documents. They just need the CDL, and they need their endorsements. You would think that would be something easy that could be given to a broker, but it's not. These carriers don't want to give up that information. It's almost like the carrier don't want that driver to be in touch with the broker. Well, those days are over. They've got to start communicating, because the broker's on the hook. Right or wrong, whatever side of the fence you on as a listener, that's the way it is right now. So where do you see, driver verification and being more digital? Because there's a lot of benefits to being digital. A lot of drivers might not understand that, but there's a lot of benefits of being digital. But so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, when that came out, a lot of people in our company, outside our organization, investors said, "How does this affect your business?"
Mhm.
And, I look at our mission statement, why we got out of bed every day, and we help good, honest, hardworking companies elevate the recruiting, compliance, and safety from good to great. What does that mean? It means that I think our customers, by nature, good, honest, hardworking, we're not trying to skirt the laws. And you asked about this one. You didn't ask about some of the other rules, like the English proficiency mandate, some of the
Right.
crackdown on the B1 visas, the
Yeah.
driver bills. I get the same questions of how is that going to impact your customers? And, we're very picky about who we work with, about good, honest, hardworking. And
Hmm.
so, frankly, they did it the right way, right? They were always using PS. They didn't have to use PSPs. They used them, right? They were diligent about their
Yep.
CSA scores and managing it, which is where a lot of the SCOTUS ruling focused on publicly accessible data, which is going to be a CSA score
Hmm.
primarily is what's available and what the plaintiff's attorneys are using or trying to use to hammer someone. They were serious about the MVRs, right? They weren't getting out the whiteout and trying to change anything. And so I think when we look at those rules and regulations, they were meant for people who are intentionally trying to skirt the law, who were playing on
Yep.
the edges. Um, and so, from how's it going to affect our business? Not a whole bunch because we just weren't interested in working with those people. Going back to the purple cow, if you're going to be playing games and living in the shadows, that's a reputation hit. And we're focused on celebrating people's 4-star, 5-star Google reviews, great pages and reviews on Truckers Report and Indeed. And so I'm giving you the non-answer because I think the majority of people in this business that we work with were doing it right.
Hmm.
And it's kind of status quo. And because I've been asking Stacey, how's this going to change your business? I'm just going to keep doing it right. I'm going to keep playing it by the book.
Yep.
The digital side, I think what it does, and the things that gets me boiling, is when Morgan and Morgan and the Hammer and that gang is nailing people to the cross for clerical issues. Right?
Right.
It's one thing to be skirting the rules. It's one thing to make a forget to dot an I.
Hmm.
Right? And you hear stories out there of nuclear verdicts where the cones were out around the truck the flashes were out. They're breaking down. A drunk driver's driving 100 miles an hour, flies around the corner, smashes in the truck, but that MVR was expired, and so my client would still be alive today if this
You're right.
company, fall. That's the type of stuff that is bogus. And so you got to put the guardrails in place to prevent, just prevent that human error from happening. Um, and then, so kind of my takeaway is I believe that the good carriers have their process in place. They play by the rules. And I think it's going to be business as usual for a lot of them. I think it's good for a company like ours where compliance is in the air and they're going to be more cautious of it. And that what spreadsheets and photocopies equal opportunity for human error. And you just
Yes.
can't afford that.
Mhm. Well, and it's funny. It seems like more conversations I'm having now. This is being brought up daily, or at least brought up in my mind. And it's a great point. I was actually talking with a transportation lawyer the other day, and he made some points that really made sense to me. He's like, we have lawyers and judges out here making decisions and battling in court. None of them understand the freight industry, and they make a ruling that we wouldn't, as it's transportation professionals, go, that's not right. Was too late. Now they've made a
Right.
precedent of it, and now they can use it on every other lawyer that's even smaller than Morgan go, well, hey, this judge said this, so we can't go that way, and it's tough that, and it might be where we have to have our own kind of court system at some point, that we've got educated people in the industry, because we do, as an industry, we have a lot of issues, and it's because we've let things just kind of, it's like a soul, you don't clean up your wound and you let it fester, and over time it starts bubbling, and then it gets bad infected, then you can have sepsis and die. And it's just like that. We've let so many things just skirt, and then we brought in all these, basically, illegals in to be truck drivers, and boom, we're hit with everything at once. And and you make a good point about the visas and all of that. We're trying to develop something at Ready App to where, it's a whole bunch more security it's got to go involved, because unfortunately the government don't have any of that stuff set up. They really don't. And if maybe they'll get there, maybe they'll use Ready App one day to be it, because we've got to have a way. We first really truly need to have a like the FFA does. We need to have a database, and we got databases, in the government for it, but not really. I mean, we should have trucking. I always say this: trucking should have been right there with FFA the day after 9/11. That all should have been one group. Being the whole transportation industry of any sorts should have been thrown in that for home security or national security, what have you. Now, my last thing I wanted to kind of go over with you before I let you go is your outlook. And you seem to be pretty big in AI, with your stuff. And AI, I like AI. I use it every day. It makes a lot of my jobs easier, where I can get more things done. I'm more efficient. I'm no big tech person, so I probably don't use it nowhere near as efficient as I should. But it's a big issue in trucking. Not only for that, with the autonomous trucks and stuff. I think autonomous trucks are still quite a bit of ways, because they can't produce even enough of them to make up for the amount of trucks. But where do you see all of this? Because I just think it gets the AI side, maybe not even talk about the autonomous part, but the AI side's only going to get better overall. Will it take some jobs? Sure. But the people that can program it and run it right, they might have two jobs, but it's no more than 8 hours a day, because the computer's doing a lot of it. So kind of just go into that. Where do you see, technology moving forward? Where do you see, even Avatar moving in the next 5 years?
Sure. And 5 years is probably about as far as any of us can look, because you think about it, it's 2026, and back in 2021, were you thinking about, as much as you're using Claude, ChatGPT, or Gemini right now? I mean,
No,
no.
no, Lord,
Pretty
no.
cool. Well, maybe I'll give a couple answers. So part one, like what's practical to use today, just as like you and your job.
Mhm.
And the way we're looking at it, implementing, is step one is operations for yourself behind the scenes. What are tasks that you do that you have to do that are repetitive, frankly, usually monotonous. It's not like you usually love them, but you got to do them.
Yep.
And think about how can you free yourself up to go do better stuff. I gave that example of the medical card. Basically, integrations, anything.
Hmm.
It's like you're typing, you're looking, you're analyzing, and frankly, AI when you're combining systems. So, a quick example about where should we go spend money on recruiting? We took a look at a customer's telematics system. We combined it with the data we had, and we said, what are your safe drivers? Where did we find them? And help us go build campaigns. And we built and it helped inspire us to go do that. So it saw patterns that we couldn't see, but then the humans came in and put the creative touch to go find it. That's kind of how I see that blend of man and AI in the next 5 years on the operational side, and what we do in our space of recruiting.
Right.
Compliance is a great example, because the rules and regulations are black and white. And
Mhm.
so that's like a knowledge base. Hey, AI, these are the rules of the game. This is the task we need to go do. Go do it. It's you have a nice clean box for it to stay in and
Mhm.
operate and do that task. Um, and then same thing when it comes to safety. Hey, here's where my accidents are happening. Let's look at trends. What should I do to prevent these from going forward? Let's start with those nickel dimers, those close calls. If you ever heard of the 329 one, for every one major,
Yep.
there's 29 minors and 300 unsafe behaviors. Let's focus on those unsafe behaviors to prevent the 29 and the one.
Mhm.
I think there's going to be some great, great stuff done there, and is happening today. All right, now let's talk about, we're out here solving the driver problem. Well, if there are no drivers and there's no driver problem to be solved. Will that happen in 5 years? I don't know. I don't think so. I've been inside Waymos before. They're pretty cool. And let's start with this. We talked about where the SCOTUS rule is coming from. Frankly, humans aren't great at it. We somehow, your
Right.
point about the airlines comparison, we have a really high standard tolerance for accidents and fatalities on the road every day, that if one happens on an airline, right, the whole world shuts down. It's
Yep.
really wild how that one mode of transportation has a high standard and one just goes, well, that's a shame. We lost some more people today. I mean, it's
Yep.
it's insane. So what does that mean? Well, with the standards so low, on highways, that actually shows that like, and it's certainly autonomous vehicles aren't perfect, but humans
Mhm.
aren't great either. And
Right.
so it's not perfection that autonomous vehicles need to hit. They need to be safer than humans. And then there's, I think the operational efficiency case is there. Now, there's service components to driving that will be trickier to figure out, whether it's tarping and chaining flatbeds, whether there's some
Mhm.
components of unloading. But step by step, Steph is going in that direction. So I think really the question is there's the technology readiness, there's the insurance question of who's going to pay the bill when something goes awry,
Yep.
and then there's lobbying groups and public perception.
Mhm.
And I think technology will be ready before those other three will slow it down and block it. I don't. I think we're in a shrinking market for drivers, but we kind of already started that with the rules and regulations we're putting in place. It will
Right.
tick up as demand increases, and then there's the quality of life for the driver. So can carriers create a job that people actually want and be proud and um, people that's you can actually raise a family and do. I know it's tough. I got a 4-year-old and 1.5-year-old at home. And if I was on the road 2.5 weeks at a time or even a week at a time, and I'm only seeing them on 34-hour restarts, man, that'd be rough.
Yeah.
So the question can we create a job where you can have a higher quality of life as a driver, and maybe that can make the job more attractive, more manageable as a driver. And but that's about as far as I can see because how fast technology is moving, what will the limitations be, and I think the interesting one will be who's picking up the tab on the accidents because that's going to be one. But that's about as far as I can see, Justin. I don't claim to be Nostradamus over here.
Well, you make some great points, and one is the attractiveness of the job. I had this conversation with the Texas Truck Association president. We've got to figure out a way to make trucking attractive again. We're not bringing in drivers like we used to. This younger generation. Why would you want to be a truck driver? I mean, if you didn't grow up in it, there's nothing attractive. You have to eat fast food. You park on the side of the road. You can't find parking. There's no amenities for you if you don't park at a truck stop. You're gone weeks at a time. Your truck breaks down. If you're a company driver, you might not work for 2 or 3 days. You don't get paid sometimes. If you're an owner operator, you're making money, but you're not retiring. So do you just go get a factory job where you're not stressed every day of making a living? So there's a lot there. And then with the technology, like on the AI, the autonomous side, technology goes so fast, they might be three types of trucks before they ever get them on the road because the next companies are creating stuff. But I'll say this on every show, I guess. It's all great until that first fatality wreck, and it's going to happen. I don't care how good the technology is; you still got the error of the human driving on the other end. There's a good chance that's going to happen. What's the perceptive? Who, like you make a good one? Who's going to pay for it? Who's liable? So what I tell drivers, if you're really worried about your job, get away from the drive-in sector. Get into a niche market, flatbed, heavy haul, things like that that's going to need a human at some point on it. Because I think we might start out with a pilot per se in the truck, and then eventually they're going to move that driver completely out. But if you're a flatbedder or a heavy hauler or hauling equipment, there's no way that company A who has the freight is going to take responsibility for that freight falling off that truck and killing somebody. The receiver's not going to do it, neither is the shipper. There's going to have to be a company in the middle. Well, the person who owns that electronic truck is not going to take responsibility if they're not the ones that's, strapping it down. So there's going to have to be a human because I don't even think insurance is going to touch it unless it's done by the person that's with it. So you bring up a lot of good points. Scott, I appreciate our conversation. I could probably talk to you another hour easy. But we do appreciate you taking time. It's a Friday, it's time to get out of here and go enjoy your weekend. But before I let you go, tell our audience, give them a pitch about the company again, give them your contact information, or if you would rather turn it and tell people what you're looking for, because I know you're big on working with good companies. So just tell them how to get a hold of you and what you're looking for.
Look, if anyone out there is struggling to find qualified people, or tired of spending more than you want to find qualified people on the recruiting side, off of the compliance side, you're tired of keying in information into multiple systems or into a spreadsheet. And on the safety side, if you just want to control your risk, stop stroking big checks to insurance companies or lawyers, that's what we built. That's the software built. So if you can check it out at avatarfleet.com. Anything that I jammed on today, hit me up at scott.ray, REA, at avatarfleet.com. And happy to help anyone solve those problems.
Well, awesome. Well, again, we appreciate you coming on, taking your time. I like your product. I like your mentality thinking on the industry. So anybody that's looking for basically any part of the ecosystem, give Scott an opportunity to give you some pricing and talk about their program that would mesh in with y'all's. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. It's been a fantastic conversation. Like I said, we've covered all the ecosystem, which a lot of companies are usually one sector. So I want to make that a point. He's trying to fix all of it, or to help fix all of it, which is very big. So we appreciate that. Everybody have a great weekend. Go check out all our socials. Share, like, follow. We appreciate it. And everybody have a good evening, and we'll talk to you again on Trucker Talk Radio. Today's episode is sponsored by Gray Cross. Every day, professional drivers make sacrifices that most people never see. Long hours, missed holidays, time away from family, and the responsibility of keeping America's supply chain moving. Gray Cross was created to support those drivers and their families when life takes an unexpected turn. By providing assistance, resources, and support during the difficult times, Gray Cross helps strengthen the trucking community one family at a time. Because behind every truck is a driver. Behind every driver is a family counting on them. If you'd like to support the mission, visit graycross.org to learn more. Donations are always appreciated, but simply sharing their message with others in the industry can make a tremendous difference. Gray Cross, supporting the people who keep America moving. Today's episode is brought to you by ReadyApp. Trust is the one most valuable asset in transportation. That's why ReadyApp created Driver Verify. Driver Verify helps carriers, brokers, and transportation companies gain greater confidence through verified driver identities, professional credentials, work history, and onboarding visibility. Drivers can securely maintain CDL information, endorsements, certifications, and employment records all in one professional profile. As fraud continues to impact the transportation industry, verification has never been more important. ReadyApp, verified drivers, trusted freight. Go check them out at ready-app.com.